Hello everybody, welcome to this lesson from Miss Duckworth's classroom. Today I'm going to be looking at paper 1 for the IBDP English A Language and Literature course. So today we're just going to be looking at how you can practice your skills for paper 1. Okay, so what do you need to do on paper 1? Now there are two different versions of paper 1 depending on whether you are standard level or higher level. As you can see, the main difference here is the timing and also the fact that for standard level you only have to do one text, whereas with higher level you have to do two texts. Now you don't just have double the time for higher level, so that means that you do have to think about how you are timing yourself in terms of looking at two texts, annotating, planning, and then writing up your response on both of those texts. So just a quick recap. So paper 1 contains two previously unseen non-literary passages. So this is why you'll be doing a lot of one-off practice on non-literary texts in your lessons, so you can practice the skills that are required for this paper. So you'll never have seen these texts before, but you will have practiced the skills countless times, so you should know what to do once you're presented with these texts. They can be taken from any of the text types listed in the course requirements, which I will show to you in a second. And in each of the ones that are chosen for the exam will be from a different text type. They'll be either complete pieces, so it's a piece in its entirety, or there'll be extracts from longer pieces, but you'll get a little piece of information at the bottom which gives you some context on the text, where it's from, and if it's full or partial. You'll be given a guiding question. It is much easier if you look at the guiding question, if you use the guiding question to help you in terms of formulating your answer, planning your ideas out. So it definitely does give you a good kind of scaffold to help you when you're answering. Okay, so these are the possible text types, so it could be taken from any of these. So it's a good idea to make sure that you're familiar with all of these and you've practiced these. And today this lesson is going to be focused on how to do or how to look at and analyze a magazine article. Okay, so here's just this is just an overview of the marking criteria for this paper. I'm not going to read through it, but it's a good idea to make yourself familiar with it. If you are familiar with it already, just have a quick look at the levels that you're looking for, that you're aiming for, and think about what your own personal target is in terms of this particular paper. So just have a look at what you can do, what you would like to be able to do, and it's a good idea to, at this stage, set yourself some personal targets. Okay, so what should you consider when looking at this paper? So here are just some of my suggestions for you. So PATMID is a good way of keeping in your head all the different things that you need to be looking out for. So what's the purpose? Who's the audience? What's the text type? Text type is very important because different text types have got different features. What's the mood? What are the ideas that are presented? What's the meaning that you can glean from this text type? And what are the devices? Now it's the devices that you will be picking out, that you'll be naming, and then you'll be analysing in terms of why they were chosen, what the effect is, and how they fit into the overall text. So in terms of your devices, you've got a range. You've got language devices, you've got structural devices, you've got presentational devices, and like I said earlier, there are lots of devices that are appropriate to text type, and you'll find that some appear in multiple different text types, but then some are quite specific to text type. Definitely have a think about how the text is structured and organised and why. Think about the style. Think about the tone, like what mood is the writer trying to put you in? How do they do that? Do they feel a certain way? Is that reflected in the language that they use? Are they trying to control you in a certain way or manipulate you? Which ideas or issues are raised? How meaning is created for you? How the devices reinforce the purpose or the meaning? And an analysis of connotations and denotations, and then think about the effect. Okay, so as always, here are the steps. So I like to break everything down into steps just so that you've got an idea of timing, but you've also got an idea of how you're building upon your ideas, and you're building in a way that enables you to write a good answer at the end of it. So definitely do spend about 5 minutes reading the question, then read through the text, think about what it's about, identify PATMID as you go. The D in PATMID, the devices, that will take a little bit longer for you to do. So you may go back and do that on on your second kind of go through of the text. So just kind of go through it, think about what kind of text it is, what it's about, what ideas are expressed, if there's a particular viewpoint that you can identify. So is it neutral? Is it objective? Is it biased? So all of those things are really good to try and kind of figure out before you then do an in-depth analysis. Once you've got your idea and you've kind of looked at the question and you've highlighted the keywords in the question, then definitely get your highlighter out and then just identify anything that is relevant to your answer. Now, what you're looking for here is you're looking for devices, techniques, anything that relays the tone to you, anything particular in terms of style, any thematic ideas that you notice. So anything really that you think that you can come back to later and you can analyze and you can use in the body of your essay. So you must make specific references to devices in your answer in order to make sure that you're gaining the marks. You can also make sure that you're kind of making notes around your highlighting. So if you've highlighted something, what is it? Why have you highlighted it? What do you learn? What is shown? What's presented? How is it presented to you? What technique is it? What's the effect of that technique? So just kind of have all these questions flying around in your head, just so that you're aware of what it is that you need to do as you're moving through the text with your highlighter. Then you want to make sure that you're giving yourself some time to plan your answer. Now, as always, these are just suggestions. The more you practice, the more you will find your own way in terms of how you will kind of allocate your time for this. So it may be that you spend 10 minutes planning your answer. It may be that you spend 15 minutes planning your answer. That just means that you've got less time to write up your answer. So I'll show you later on what a plan looks like, and the plan shouldn't be that detailed. It gives you an idea of what you're going to be talking about, so it's very, very important to have, but you don't need to write everything in your plan. It's just there to give you kind of, oh, this is what I'm going to put as my first point, this is what I'm going to put as my second point. It gives you a clear structure, and it helps you in terms of knowing where your essay is going and what you want to talk about and when. So do just keep an eye on the time as you're doing this and make sure that you have given yourself enough time to write up your answer. Remember, without that, you're not going to get any marks. So this is where you get your marks from. This is where you show the examiner what you can do. Now, this timing is my suggestion for standard level at this stage. I will do a higher level lesson later on, because you have to then divide your time between, obviously you get more time, but then you have to divide your time between two different texts, so the timing is slightly different, but for now we'll just practice with standard level. Okay, now I said today we're going to be looking at a magazine article, so it's always a good idea, once you see the text, you should be able to recall from your memory what the features of that text are. The features of that text type. So we're going to be looking at a magazine article. These are all the different features that you may find in a magazine article that you may want to talk about. And the style depends on the type of magazine. Therefore, you definitely have to consider this when analysing. As you're aware, there are many different types of magazine. They all have a different purpose. They have a different style, they have a different readership, so do consider what kind of magazine it is if that's the text type that you are given. So I'm not going to read through this. If you do want to have a look through yourself, if you just want to remind yourself of the features of a magazine article, then please do just pause the video and just have a look, have a read, and maybe make some notes if you weren't too sure beforehand. Okay, so here are just a few questions to ask yourself as you're kind of engaging with the text. So why has the writer chosen this topic? Is it controversial? Is it something that's of historical importance or significance, or national importance or significance? Is it a contemporary issue? Is it an ongoing issue? So think about why. Why this particular topic? Why not another one? What is the writer hoping to achieve? So what's their purpose here? What do they want to get from this? By the time you finish reading their article, what do they want? What do they want you to think, feel, do, understand? How would the reader react? How do you know? So the language that's used helps you to understand this question, how do you know? The structure even, the kinds of images that are used, all of this helps you with the how do you know? What is the overall theme, and how is this achieved? what is stated, so what's obviously stated for you, but also what's implied. So you've got denotations, but you've also got connotations. So think about what's suggested as well. What is the context, and how does this help you to understand the meaning? So you may not get something that's contemporary to you. You may get something that's from a different decade, a different time period completely. So do always consider the context. How has that influenced the writer and the writer's choices? And what point are they trying to make? What's the overall point or idea that they're trying to make with this article? So do just consider these questions as you go through. Okay, so also remember what, how, and why. So I do talk about this a lot. I think it's massively helpful in terms of understanding the process that you go through when you talk about anything, whether it be literary or non-literary. So think about your whats first of all. So what are you shown, or what is presented, or what viewpoint is given, or what do you learn? And then you've got to ask yourself, well, how? How do I know this? How is this presented? How do I know that the writer feels this way? How am I learning this? And then you move on to the why. So why is this particular technique used? Why is this particular device used? Why do they want me to understand this particular viewpoint? And then we move down here. So you've also got the what do you see, which links to the devices. So do you see repetition, or do you see a simile, or do you see a short sentence, or do you see a declarative statement? And then we go to the why. Why has this been used, and what is the effect? So these words here, the what, the how, the why, keep those in your head and keep asking yourself those questions, because every time you do ask yourself one of these questions, you're enabling yourself to develop your response further and to be a little bit more evaluative and analytical. So all of these what's here are to do with the different ideas that are presented. The how here is to do with the devices or the techniques. And over here, this is also to do with the devices. So it doesn't really matter the order in which you ask yourself these questions. Just make sure that you are constantly asking yourself these questions and providing your own answer. And the why refers to the writer's intention, the purpose, the message. So don't forget that that's very important in terms of talking about a particular text type. What is it that they hope to achieve? What is their purpose? How do they want to affect the reader? Okay, so the text that I'm going to use today is this one here. So it's from, so it's a magazine article from Time magazine, and the title is "The Senate Sits on Common Sense Gun Reform While Americans Die." So I haven't included the whole text here, but I will include the full text. I will upload it later on. So just so you've got an idea, this is what I'm going to be commenting on in terms of the example for today. So the first thing that I did, so I'm going to go through the same steps that I'm suggesting for you. So this is the question here. Discuss how different features are used in this article to inform and influence the reader. And you'll notice that I've highlighted inform and influence because those are important words. They're really going to guide my response here. So I'm looking for anything in terms of how the writer is giving information, what information they're giving, why they're giving certain elements of information, but also ways in which they're trying to influence me, the reader. Because this also kind of gives you a clue. So don't forget to use the question as well to help you. So the question sometimes guides you very specifically. It may even use the word persuade, for example. So do consider the question, highlight the key words, think about what you're being asked to do, and that really helps you when you're going through the text and you're trying to pick out anything that is relevant. So the steps here: read the question, which I've now done, then read through the text. Try and identify as much of PATMID as you can. So what I've done here is I've just summarised for you my notes. This is what I would do in an exam situation. So very, very quickly, just written some very brief notes on what it's about, because this will help to kind of flesh out my points later on when I write my essay. So it's about gun laws, but specifically it's about how they need to be reformed. So if I mention that, I've shown the examiner that I do understand the specific viewpoint that is being presented. It's about the deaths that are caused because of these laws. It's about making a change. to the laws and how the public can vote to make a change. So this is kind of where the influence comes in. And it's definitely one-sided. So all of this information shows the examiner that I've really understood what the text is about. So then I've just done a little bit of a summary for myself down here, because again, all of these things will help me to flesh out my essay, but also it helps me when I'm trying to construct the introduction, because you want to have kind of an overview in your introduction. So the purpose is to inform and to persuade. The audience is adults because of where this article is from. So it's from Time magazine. The mood is very serious, talks about death, talks about guns, talks about law, but it's also quite critical of the current law. It's current affairs, it's talking about politics. So the context of this is it's 2020, so it's very, very relevant. And for the devices, I will annotate as I go. So I'm not going to list the devices here, but you'll see on the next slide an example of how I would just annotate as I was going if this was an exam situation. So step 3 and 4 this is where you go through, you use your highlighter, you highlight anything that you think is interesting, but you also make little notes for yourself to help yourself to remember what you want to say about them. So here what I'm really looking for is what is shown, how it's shown, what's the effect, and this is what you'll see in my notes. So I do suggest that you go in chronological order, start at the very beginning and just work your way through. Every time you get to something that's significant or that stands out or you think you can comment on, then you stop and you make notes. So you'll notice that I haven't made notes on every single thing. I've not made notes on every sentence. What I've done is I've gone through and thought, okay, what stands out for me? What could I talk about? What could I analyse? And that's what I've made notes on. So the first thing here is the headline. So my notes, it's emotive. There's use of alliteration, and what I can see here is that it immediately positions blame. So you can see that this person is blaming the Senate. So that already introduces some kind of bias. So I'm going to show that I understand that. Then we have the image. It's the first thing that we see. It does stand out. It gets our attention, but it also sets the tone. So when you have an image, really look at that image. Have a look at the caption underneath that tells you where the image is from, what it's presenting, because it's not just an image of 2 flags and a crowd. It actually is a vigil for victims of a mass shooting. So it immediately sets this tone, and it lets you know what you can expect from the rest of the article. So do try and look at everything that you can in an image and really pull it apart, deconstruct it and analyze the different parts of it and think about how effective it is and why it's been used. Then as I was reading through, I noticed that normal was repeated, definitely stuck out for me, and I thought, okay, that's definitely something that I think I could possibly talk about. So I've highlighted to myself there's a repetition of normal here, and maybe that will be a point that I talk about later on. I noticed that in this first paragraph, with the effect we have is a list. Usually lists, we just have lots of items, and quite often they can be inanimate items, but actually this list is of people, and it actually builds up the significance of the victims. So I thought that was very significant. It's almost anecdotal because it's like this person is telling us a story. Even though it's true, they're recollecting what they know about these victims, but it does seem quite anecdotal. It does lull us into a false sense of security because at this point we don't have anything negative. So it does then make the next paragraph even more shocking, which you will see from my notes over here. So note how I've identified, this is what I see. I see a list, but then this is what the effect is. All of these notes here are my what the effect is. My next point here is to do with this line, then because of America's lax gun laws, they were all shot and killed. It's quite emotionless. It's just kind of thrown at the reader here in the first line. But because we're given these facts and the writer is quite direct, you could argue that it makes us trust the writer because they're presenting us with the facts. They're presenting something which is shocking, but they're not trying to hide it. They're not trying to sugarcoat it. So this is my example of my annotation so far. I'm not going to go through the entire article with you. I just wanted to give you an idea of what I'd noticed just from this short section, and also just to demonstrate for you how you should be annotating and making notes as you go through. So like I said, you do not have to annotate every single line. You look for things that stand out. You look for things that creates an effect for you, and then you think about how that effect is created, and that's where you build up your analysis. So once you've annotated, you then decide on your plan. So this is obviously step 5. Use your annotated copy of the text, because you will look at what you've mentioned and you'll decide on what you actually want to talk about. So my plan here, and again, once you practice this and once you find your own way with this, you will know how much you are able to write. So it's really difficult for me to say you should write 5 points, you should write 3 points. Really, you write as much as you can in the time. So don't be restricted by a specific amount of points that you should mention. You just keep going until you think that, well, until the time runs out. So I think that I probably in 50 minutes would be able to talk about 5 different ideas. So that's 10 minutes for each idea. So that gives me 10 minutes to develop it, to analyze it, to really look at it in detail. So for me, I think possibly 5, remembering that I also want to be able to have time to write an introduction and a conclusion, which then takes a little bit of time away from 10 minutes per point. But again, you will, by the time you get to this exam, you will have this down to, a very good skill. You will know exactly how much you can write. So if I don't get to my 5th point, it doesn't really matter. It's always better to have an extra point than write all your points out, realize you've got an extra 10 minutes, but then be scrabbling back through your text thinking, oh, I'm not sure what I want to talk about. So just quickly make a very brief plan. Just gives you an idea, gives you a sense of focus, and it helps to give your writing structure, which is important. You'll see that is also on the mark scheme, so the way in which you structure your ideas. Okay, so the structure of your entire answer. So I'm not going to read through all of this, so you can pause the video right now and you can just either have a look or make some notes. But I will just focus on the introduction. So the introduction is just where you give your overview, you show that you've understood the text, what it's about, what the purpose is, where it's from, definitely the context of the text. You'll be given some contextual information, and others you'll be able to infer. And then you have your points here, which build up the body of your essay. And then you have your conclusion, which will differ depending on whether you are high level or standard level. So top tips here: use linking phrases to make transitions between your points. Use academic phrases to develop your analysis and discussion of the text. So the writer skillfully uses, so things like that to show that you're really able to talk about this text in a sophisticated way. Structure your ideas sequentially in order to follow the natural progression of the article. Unless, for example, you find something whereby you want to talk about repetition and that repetition goes throughout the article, or maybe you want to talk about circular structure. But it is easy if you just go through in a sequential manner. Okay, so the success criteria here. Again, I'm not going to read through the success criteria. I've spoken a lot about these different areas throughout this lesson already, but if you do want to just pause the video and just read through them, just to make sure that you've clearly understood the success criteria before I go through the example with you, then just pause the video now. Okay, so here is part of an example answer. So as you can see, this is an example of the introduction. So you have an idea of what to write in your introduction, but also it's the first point in response to the question. So I'm just going to go through and maybe highlight for you the different areas, the different skills and the different ways in which this answer is targeting the mark scheme. So the text, an article from Time magazine, is a contemporary text that aims to give information about gun laws and the effects of these in America. So note that it's an article, and the source is Time magazine, and I've also said it's contemporary. So I've looked at the date, 2020, it's contemporary. And then I've said what it's about. It's not just about gun laws, but it's also about the effects of gun laws. So I'm trying to be as specific as possible here. However, the writer Shannon Watts also seeks to influence the reader and presents a strong and consistent argument against gun freedom. So I've mentioned the name of the writer, but I've also making links here to the question, which is influence, and I've given the viewpoint or perspective here. The text is aimed at a large demographic, as Time magazine is well known and read the world over. The target audience are most likely American citizens, as there is an implied suggestion that Americans should use their voice in the upcoming election. However, this article would also reach a global audience due to the recognised nature of the magazine. So look at how I'm trying to really think about who the audience is. So who is the target audience? Who is the implied audience, but who is the actual audience? Like, who will actually read this article? So it may be aimed at American citizens, but because of the scope of Time magazine and how famous it is, it's probably going to be read globally. The writer employs some technical vocabulary and legal jargon, but not overly so. Therefore, those not familiar with the intricacies of the law are not alienated. So here I've just spoken a little bit about the style of the article, and also I've tried to link that back to the audience. The content is relevant, and many concrete examples are used to reinforce the message and make it more real for the reader. So again, I'm now talking about the style, the methods employed by the writer and why that is. But notice how I'm not going into an awful lot of detail here, because I will do that in the body of the essay. I'm just still giving an overview of what I've noticed from the article. The writer is clearly writing from a one-sided perspective and offers several reasons as to why gun laws should be reformed. Again, I'm going back to the purpose of the article. I'm going back to the viewpoint or perspective of the writer to show that I've really understood the intricacies of this article. In doing so, Watts also seeks to align the reader with her opinion and influence their own judgment with regards to gun laws in America. The text attempts to appeal to the moral conscience of the reader, as by the end of the article they understand how valuable their choice is in the upcoming election. So I've kind of gone through the entire article without using specific examples, but I've gone through the entire article and I've tracked the argument. I've tracked the way that this person has presented their ideas and the way in which they want to affect the reader. So here we have the main body, and this is where, from the plan that I made, this is where you will see my first point on the plan. The tone of the article is immediately established through the combination of both headline and image. So these are the devices. This is my how. So what I'm talking about is a tone, and how I know the tone is through the headline and the image. The writer employs emotive language early on in order to emphasize the severity of the topic. So again, we've got more devices here. So we're going to want some evidence somewhere. The use of the word die as the last word in the headline is extremely effective in not only presenting one of the main problems discussed in the article, but also as a way of shocking the reader into wanting to understand more about the topic. So notice how I've gone in a bit more detail here, using references from the text. So you have to make sure that you're using references. You have to make sure that you're analysing the choices that have been made by the writer and saying how they affect the reader. In addition, so the use of in addition here suggests to the examiner that I'm going to build upon my point. I'm going to build upon my interpretation here, which is exactly what this does, because it now brings in a different technique. In addition, the juxtaposition of the Senate sitting while Americans are dying is meant to cause outrage and immediately positions the Senate as the enemy. So the interpretation of meaning here and the analysis of technique is evident. The Senate is further undermined by the use of common sense, which indicates that there is a simple solution that is obvious to all, yet is not being observed by those in power. So notice how this particular paragraph is layered. So it's all talking about the same thing, it's all talking about the headline, yet it's been layered in terms of talking about the different aspects of the headline and how all of those different aspects, they work together to create an overall meaning. So it's almost like you pulled apart the headline, analysed each different section, but then said how it works together. This immediately seeks to not only inform the reader of the topic of the article, but also to align them with the opinion of the writer. So very clear discussion here on the effect of the reader, but also the intention of the writer. Watts expertly pairs this headline with a large image that precedes the main article. So now we're moving on to the image. It's still the same point, because in my plan, I wanted to talk about them together, but obviously paragraph is going to get too long, so I've just moved it into a separate paragraph. But also recognize how I am moving sequentially through the article. So the headline comes first and then the image comes second, and this is how I'm talking about them. The image not only arrests the reader's attention, but it also presents a common sight in America, those protesting the loss of life due to gun crime. Interestingly, Watts uses an image of a vigil for the victims of a mass shooting. This further creates pathos for the reader, as it is this familiar scene in America, and it is images such as these that often make national and international news. So look at how I'm putting it within the context of the article, but also notice the academic phrases here: expertly, interestingly. This further creates. Furthermore, the image captures the back of a crowd facing flags flying at half-mast. Now, this actually is my evidence. Obviously, you can't use a quotation from an image. Where you cannot use a direct quotation, you describe what it is that you're talking about. So this is my evidence. And once I've got my evidence in there, now I'm going to analyse my evidence. This plays on the idea of a national conscience, as the flag is presented here as both the symbol of pride, but also of disgrace. This image also allows the reader to feel as if they are also a member of the anonymous crowd, thereby immediately drawing them into the grief, sadness, and anger created by both the image and the headline. It can therefore be argued that even before the reader has accessed any of the article's content, Watts has skillfully aligned them with their own view in order to build upon this and further influence the reader as they continue with the article. So notice how I'm constantly referring to the choices that this writer makes, why things are where they are. So why is this first? Why is this second? Why does she want to create this at the beginning? So everything is why, and then you attempt to answer it. And that's you interpreting the meaning, that's you interpreting the intention of the writer, but also analysing the effect. Okay, so that is the end of the lesson today. Thank you very much for taking part in this. Goodbye.